It's new, it's refreshing, it's life-giving. Make a date with John Kpikpi from City of God Church on the Rebuilding the Nations program.
Love is laying down your lives for somebody else. The overall goal of discipleship is to make people to become like Jesus.
Rebuilding the Nations, an opportunity to restart your life, your marriage and your family, our churches and our nations on the sure foundation of God's truth. Rebuilding the Nations, ever challenging but refreshing.
Then of course we go on to the 5th day and we find the water creatures. And we are told, God said this, let the water teem or be filled with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing with which the water teems according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Are we encountering the first fish farmer here? It's for you to judge. And then of course the birds, are we encountering the greatest poultry farmer here? It's for you to judge. God made these creatures, which is what separates him from any fish farmer, poultry farmer, or any other farmer, as we've been trying to do these things. I recognize that we are being anthropomorphic, that is trying to think of God after human terms, but it's a ploy to help us to get hold of who he really is. But here we find somebody who makes all the birds. Some people, they've got 10,000 birds in their poultry farm, and they are immensely proud of it, and they ought to be. Some people have got 60,000 birds, and they are immensely proud of it, and they ought to be proud of it. But we're talking about, and they didn't even make these birds, we're talking about the God who in wisdom decided how these birds should be made, how they should look like, what should be their covering, and then of course, in millions and millions and millions of numbers. It's a great, great work of God, creating the creatures of our world. Then of course we go on to the 6th day, and here we are told he created the wild animals. So what we now know as the rabbits and the lions and the elephants and the monkeys and all the other wild animals, the leopards, the zebras. He made all these animals. And then at the end of this, we are told, he said this, let us make man in our image. This is on day 6. He said this, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. The animals were created on the same day as human beings were created, the man and the woman, but they are separated with a very, very important distinction. This is it. God said, let us make man in our own image. Of all the creatures that he had made, only the man and the woman did he make in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he formed them. If you think about our earth as a massive house with a huge garden around it, well, this is how I want you to begin to imagine what God built. He built something far exceeding the largest houses any of us have been able to build. He built the earth. Beyond that, he built the universe. Massive, massive proportions. So God poured out his energy and his skills and his wisdom and his time into creating all that surrounds us, as we've been looking at. And then, of course, the pinnacle of his creative work was the man and the woman whom he created. If you don't believe me that God was actually working, then I invite you to look at this verse. By the seventh day, God had finished the work. Did you hear that? He had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. And not only does God call what he was doing work, he also gives us a very, very important hint about what he was doing, that he needed a rest. God Almighty needed a rest. It's the first time and probably the only time that we hear God wanting to get a rest, which tells us that the work of creation was massive. The work of creation was huge. The work of creation was exhausting. The work of creation has such a huge impact, or God poured himself out so much that he needed to have a rest. So he took a whole day off. We will come back to this another time. So if you were present during the first 6 days of creation, and you had the privilege of watching God at work, bringing everything into being, you would have ended up giving many descriptive names to God. According to what we think in our world right now, he clearly will emerge as a fantastic mechanical engineer, a great electrical engineer, an amazing hydraulics engineer, somebody who also puts on laborers' clothes and pushes the water back so that he can have some dry ground. He will emerge in our descriptions as a big-time farmer with masses and masses or unlimited acreage of things that he had planted. He would emerge as a poultry farmer with a massive, massive poultry farm, and of course the animals. If we take all this into account, we will see that God would have emerged as someone who pioneered all the kinds of works that we do on the earth today, and perhaps much more, as we shall discover. And so if you're getting excited about what is coming up about our God, the one who made the heaven and earth, and we're beginning to appreciate him as the one who participated in work and took part in work, I want to say to you, we have a lot to learn from this God as we seek understanding about work in our world. So from now on, I'm going to mention 7 truths that we can draw from the creation story that I've been trying to retell today. The first thing is this: God is the first and greatest worker ever seen. He is the originator of work. He was the first person who worked. He was the first person who did what we now know as work. Nobody did it before him, and he initiated it. He started it, and he demonstrated what we now come to know as work. He is the first worker and also the greatest worker of all time, judging from the scale and the expanse and the extent to which he went into. He is the first and greatest worker ever seen. He therefore qualifies as the one who originated what we now know as work, but also one who holds the patent on work. Did you hear me say that? He holds the patent on work. Everybody who tries to work after that is actually copying what God did in the beginning. The next truth that we find from the creation story is that work is good simply because God took part in it. You see, God is our definition or our standard of what is good. So all that God does is good. If God was involved in work, as we are discovering, then work is good. And the opposite also needs to be said. Idleness, folding our hands, not doing anything, is bad. It's bad business. So work is good. Our attitude to work must carry this understanding that work, as we know it now, is a good thing for us to participate in. It's something that God himself took part in, and it should be seen as a privilege for us to join in and get involved with what God himself had put his hands to. The next truth I want to mention is that God is a creative and multi-skilled worker. Now, for those of you who have built houses before, you quickly realize the number of people you need to depend on to give you counsel and wisdom to build one house. You will need, first of all, the architect to design the house for you. Then you will going to need the civil engineer to tell you what sort of steel and other strengthening things that should go into the house. And then on top of that, you need a quantity surveyor to give you an estimate of what it's going to cost. You also, at some point, need the masons to come along to do the nitty-gritty of building the house. You need carpenters to come and put some form work into it. Then you need the electricians to come in, and then you need all the laborers. You need so many different skills to come in to do just one house. Think about the earth. Think about the universe as one massive house. And yet, God did it all on his own. He must have all these skills in him. He's a multi-skilled person. He was able to arrange all these things. He had it in him. The wisdom to build, the wisdom to create. The other thing that we said about God is that he created out of nothing. It wasn't there. There was no world. There was no universe there at the beginning. But at the end of his work, we find a universe. So he has created something. So God is creative and a multi-skilled worker. Number 4, we mustn't lose sight of this. God worked very hard. So hard that he needed a whole day's rest. See, creation was not a magical trick that God pulled out of his hat. You know, like magicians, they come and say this and that, and then they actually, it's all a big deception. They're not doing anything. They're just moving their hands faster than the eyes. That's what magic does. But in creation, we see a God who is not doing magic, but is actually expending himself in wisdom, in knowledge, in physical strength, using his hands, getting his hands dirty, getting his clothes dirty, if he had whatever it was, sweating and getting tired and working very, very hard over a period of 6 days so that he took some rest. So I want to say this to you. God worked very hard. So hard work should be considered a very godly thing, actually. Then the next thing I want to mention is that God evaluated his own work by an ethical standard. At the end of every day, God will check over what he had done. And he judged everything he had made by his own ethical standards. He comes down and looks at the end of the first day, and God saw that it was good. He wanted to find out whether what he had created was good or wasn't as good as he expected it to be, or didn't reach the standard, or whether it failed completely. God evaluated his own work, and it was by his ethical standards. So in Genesis 1 verse 4, after he had created the light, we discovered this. God saw that it was good. And Genesis 1:10, after he had made the land and the seas, we are told God saw that it was good. And Genesis 1:12, after he had created the crops and other plants and trees, we are told God saw that this was very good. And then, of course, Genesis 1:18, when he had made the sun and the moon and the stars, we are told God looked over what he had made and said it was good. Again, after he had made the fish and the birds in Genesis 1:21, we read that God saw that all he had made was good. Again, he checked it over after he had made the land animals and human beings. There he got even extra credit. We are told he saw that it was very good. What's happening here? God was doing two things. First of all, he was declaring work to be good, and what he had done, what he had pushed his energies into. And secondly, he was setting the tone or setting the standard for all future work. He was saying that just as he assessed himself, just as he judged his own work, he was expecting that all future work will also be assessed and judged, and it will be an ethical standard that he will set up. He wants all work that will be done after him to win the acclamation, good, good, good. It means that anybody who is seeking to work should be thinking, ooh, how can I do a good job here? How can I do things well? God is saying that all future work should be good, and all future work, those who do it should assess the work. They should judge the work themselves. They should find out whether they have done a good job. God was pointing the way in this regard. So this is an important point for us. Work should not simply be haphazard. God did not do a haphazard work, but God did a good job. It's as simple as that. That should begin to tell us something as we work our way approaching what man's work should be like. The next thing I want to say, or the next truth about the creation story that we discover about God and work, is that God's work was done to bless the human beings that he had made. It's incredible to think about this, but it is true that all this exertion of energy and of wisdom and of power to create the whole universe was done entirely so that the pinnacle of his creation, human beings, will be able to live and flourish in his creation. So you will discover, for example, if you read the story, that human beings were not made at the beginning where there was no land. No. They were not made before the plants, before the animals. No. God made sure that he had pushed away the dry ground for human beings to stand on and walk on. God made sure that he had filled the earth with what could become food for the human beings, plants and animals. God made sure that he had all these things in place. Then, and only then, did he make man. He blessed man with his creation. In fact, he gave all the creation to the man and the woman. So God's work was done to bless the human beings that he had made. He was working so hard in order to create a good and suitable home for the human beings that he had created. This should become a very, very important definition for the kind of work that we put our hands to. This should become a very important yardstick for the work of every man and every woman on the earth. It also ought to be such that the output blesses human beings rather than cursing them. I want to say this to you. God had human beings in mind and at heart when he came to create the heavens and the earth. And he gave everything over to them. And the seventh truth we want to underline here is this. God did all this work for free. Have you ever thought about that? After creating the lights, the great lights and the little lights, after creating the space for man to be on, after creating the plants and the animals, after creating the human beings themselves, whom did he give his bill to? Who got the bill? Who paid the bill? No one. What did he ask man to pay for? Nothing. So we find an amazing thing here. The greatest worker, the first worker, the one who exerted himself over and above what any other human being could ever do, he did not charge anything for his work. He charged absolutely nothing for his work. Well, let me put it more bluntly. He had no salary for his work, no bonuses for his work. The greatest work, the smartest work, the most beneficial work for us was delivered all for free. And this was, again, did not happen only once, When we think about Christ Jesus our Lord, the Son of God who came into our world, who healed the sick, he didn't give the bills to anybody. He raised the dead. He did not present the bills to anybody. When he produced lots of food for those who were hungry, feeding the 5,000, there was no bill for anybody to pick up. And then ultimately, when he went up to the cross, when he gave his life on the cross, the sacrificial death that purchased us, that bought our salvation, that was sufficient to start the whole new creation, nobody was giving the bill. It was done completely for free. Jesus, God the Son, was doing exactly what God did in the beginning. Created all these things, amazing, vast array, the universe, the planets, the air, the water, all that we have, all for free. He gives them to us. And then he says to the man, I want you to take this, inherit it, I want you to master it, I want you to use it, I want you to work it. Brothers and sisters, what God did at the beginning of creation we can call a grace gift to man. Freely he gave them to us. And what he did at the beginning of the new creation, that is the coming of Jesus, his death and sacrifice, his death, his burial, his resurrection from the dead, again, entirely for free. God did it all for free. How about our work? I still want to mention this. The most important tasks in this world, the most beneficial tasks in this world are still done for free, actually. If you think about the air that we breathe, it's all for free. If you think about the salvation that comes to us, again, all for free. This is God, the same God that spoke the whole creation into being. Is the same God that announces and declares and launches the new creation through his Son, Jesus Christ. His work in the beginning was for free. His work in the middle of the road is for free. And today, the most important and valuable things are actually voluntary.
Hello viewers. Over the past few weeks, we've been bringing to you Rebuilding Marriage on our Rebuilding the Nation TV program. I'm sure you all agree with me, one of the greatest strongholds that affects every nation is the whole area of marriage. Failing marriages or failed marriages have become a big problem, and unfortunately, even the church has not been spared. In this series of teachings on marriage, John Kpikpi has brought us excellent material that will help us build good marriages for those of us who are not yet married and preparing to get married. For those who are married and having challenges, there's a lot of material to help you as well. And for those who maybe have come to the end of the road and are really considering divorce, don't make that decision yet. Get hold of this material, and I believe it has the power to transform your marriage. We have available 11 DVDs containing the 20 30-minute episodes. There's something for everyone. Topics that we looked at included God's vision for marriage. Under God's vision for marriage, he helped us see that God had a threefold vision in mind when he instituted marriage. 1, for companionship. 2, so that the two could become one flesh. And then 3, to demonstrate a mystery of God himself. Then there was the teaching on the marriage ceremony itself, where John helps us see that it does not have to be a burden on the couple that's getting married, but he suggests very practical ways in which we can do our marriage ceremony so they are both honoring to God and yet very pleasing to the people involved as well. Yeah, we also have DVDs for the teaching on grace as a foundation for marriage. Excellent teaching on how the grace of God, if properly understood and worked out in our lives, will be the surest foundation for building solid, excellent marriages that are a blessing to both the people involved and to the whole nation as well. We also have DVDs on the teaching on preparing for a great marriage, which was an interactive session with students at the University of Ghana. Really good teaching on how to prepare for a great marriage. Very good for young people and single people who are yet to get into the whole exciting adventure of marriage. And then there's the DVD on resolving conflict. If you are having difficulty in marriage, well, get this DVD and you learn that it's normal, it's to be expected. And in this teaching, John also helps us with ways in which we can resolve conflict in marriage. So the conflicts come in to really rather build up the marriage and make it good instead of destroying the marriages. Get a copy of this and it might just save your marriage. Then finally, he brought to us the excellent teaching on love and submission in marriage. In our modern post-Beijing world, it can be very difficult to work that out, even in Christian homes. The whole area of love and submission. How does it work out without the power struggles and all that? Well, get these DVDs. Watch every one of them. I recommend that you watch them together as husband and wife. You can also get copies for your friends who you know will benefit a lot from this. Why not even get it for small groups? Get a copy of these DVDs, invite a few friends together, watch it together, discuss it, and see how God will use these resources to bless your marriage, thereby blessing your community and our nation at large. Now, for each of these topics, we also had discussion times, which we called Rebuilding Talk Time with John Kpikpi. All of these are also available on DVDs, where you can really listen to in-depth explanation for some of the things he taught during the Rebuilding Marriage teachings. Now, I really want to recommend that you order a full set of DVDs, 11 DVDs in all, covering 20 excellent teaching on rebuilding marriages. Ordering the whole set of DVDs attracts a great discount. I believe that these DVDs are packed with truth that has the power to transform marriages in our nation. As we rebuild marriages together, be a part of it. Get a set of DVDs, order some for your friends as well, and let's rebuild marriage in our nation. God bless you.
City of God Church is part of New Frontiers, a worldwide family of churches on a mission together to make disciples, raise up leaders, plant churches, and transform our nations. We meet every Sunday at 10 a.m. in Ashaley Botwe, Accra. Come, let's worship Jesus together. God bless you and see you soon.